Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, October 10th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ford announces massive layoffs because of Trump's Chinese tariffs. Meanwhile, the assault on voting rights spreads across the country, aided and abetted by the Supreme Court. Did Trump know of the Saudis' plan to kill a U.S. resident journalist? And are we done with the Saudis quite yet? Hurricane Michael poised to be the worst storm to hit Florida Panhandle ever. And the Trump administration is mum on the IPCC report, but the EPA chief did post Pizzagate and racist tweets. So we got that going for us. The VA refuses to hand over documents about outside businessmen who were sort of running the VA for a while. And the Dems force a Senate vote on Trump's junk insurance plans. And with Kavanaugh seated, polls show that Democrats are energized for the midterms. Trump laments Medicare for all, warns it will give Medicare to socialism.
Right. Exactly.
And the case to cancel all student debt. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. It is Wednesday, hump day. That's what we call it around here. We didn't coin that phrase. Can we turn down that fan a little bit? Just a little bit. It's, of course, it's almost mid-October, so of course it's a balmy 75 degrees in New York City. You all know, right? I mean, this is pretty basic stuff, but why global warming will increase the severity of storms like Hurricane Michael, right? I mean, I don't need to. Well, there's always a chance we have some conservatives listening. And if we do, by any chance, have any listening, please, by all means, call in 646-257-3920. We'll try and get to calls a little bit early today, if we can. But this is pretty basic stuff. The way that moisture gets up into the air is it evaporates from bodies of water. And if the water already is warmer than, well, if the water is warm, then the ability to it evaporate is actually increased. You will notice this if you boil some water and put a glass cover on the pot. You'll see that the water actually evaporates and hits the top of the pot, the lid. Well, when the water is warmer, that sends more water and up into the air, and of course, also heat creates energy, and then you get a more powerful storm that whips with more.
Wait, slow down. There's a relationship between energy and heat. You're saying?
That's true. That's true. So.
Science report up in here.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, Saul has a book where it actually just I think it's like the Magic School Bus, and it talks about how the water cycle. And
I think
just
come
thought-
December it's gonna be pretty cold around here. So
Yeah, I guess there's no global warming as soon as we see any of the. But with that said, I know that sounds a little bit condescending, but I want to give you the President of the United States on his response about the IPCC report. This is the United Nations intergovernmental report on climate change, and it involves hundreds, if not thousands, of scientists across the country, across the globe. And we mentioned yesterday, obviously, if you listened to the program and you did not decide to check out, and you're still with us, you heard yesterday that this report is pretty dire. And we have about 10 years or so if we are going to in any way mitigate the implications of the globe warming. And but, Donald Trump took it all in stride and apparently thinks that the report is actually just, maybe he takes it a little too literally when he hears people saying it paints a dire picture. Here he is.
Read the UN report this week warning about climate change, requiring drastic action.
It was given to me. All
right, pause it 1 second. For those of you who are listening, he's asked the question. Are you aware of the climate change report that was issued by the IPCC? Here, and then he responds.
It was given to me. It was given to me, and I want to look at who drew it, which group drew it, because I can give you reports that are fabulous, and I can give you reports that aren't so good. But I will be looking at it, absolutely.
I can't even understand that. Well, first of all, it is the IPCC. So it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So that's who drew it. I don't know what drew it means.
Well, they give him all of his reports in cartoon form.
That's right. So, I see what you're saying. So it's like, I got, someone drew a picture, literally drew a picture. And it's, I got to look at it. I got to see who drew it. And
in one picture, the sun had a frowny face, but I have another picture where the sun was wearing sunglasses.
I picture.
So you have to weigh the evidence.
I imagine it is like someone drew a picture of a guy walking on a street, and there's like a manhole, and down at the bottom like pointy things, and he's about to fall in. That's the way I would have represented that to the president.
But there's another picture where Mar-a-Lago is worth more money than Buckingham Palace.
Yes,
so
we'll see.
Gotta think about things.
So that's less than encouraging. Let's start here, because what's been fascinating over the past week is, and the Republicans are quite good at this, creating this notion that somehow a vote against Kavanaugh was going to be detrimental to their electoral chances. Now, Susan Collins had to make a decision. And I'm not convinced that John McCain passing away didn't greatly change the calculation for someone like Lindsey Graham and for Susan Collins. Like, I don't think it was a coincidence that Graham had his sort of showboating moment where he
2020 primary.
Well, I think it's a 2020 primary, but I think it's also a question of branding. I think there is an awareness that, like, they can't, there is not the same opportunity to be this type of senator. Like, it doesn't have any value anymore. It doesn't, there is, with John McCain, to the extent that there was any wing of the Republican Party, and I wouldn't even say it's a wing at that point, it was a couple of feathers at the edge of a wing that was pretending to be something that really doesn't exist in the Republican Party anymore. John McCain, when he left, that coalition, lost a significant percentage of the people who were in it, right? Like, I mean, to the extent that there was one, was there 3 people in that? You sort of wing of the, you lost 33% of it. And so Graham went his direction, and I think Collins also made the same assessment, that there is no room. There's no path for me within the Republican Party to maintain even my veneer of moderation. And, we saw her speech, which it seemed like, let her talk for another 10 minutes and she'd be talking about Pizzagate. But the conventional wisdom was that the Kavanaugh nomination had energized Republicans, and it may have. And there were early reports that the Democrats were worried what would happen if Kavanaugh was not confirmed. And the Republicans, they were worried if they didn't pass Kavanaugh that it would hurt them. Well, new polling out now shows that 46% of voters said the Senate made the wrong decision in approving of the Kavanaugh. 40% said it was the right to elevate him to the high court. Now, this is a national poll. So, in some respects, it doesn't matter because there's no national election.
Yeah, it's a good thing they don't decide things by the popular vote.
Well, the thing is that we only have state elections, right? I mean, there's no national election in the off year. So really it's more important what any specific state says or what any specific congressional district says. But this gives you a broad sense of what's going on.
But for general Democratic purposes, it's not looking good.
What's not looking good in terms of...
Just one more example of why the Supreme Court is not in any way a democratic institution, right?
Well, of course it's not a democratic institution. In fact, half the members now, or at least, is it half the members or 1/3 of the members, 4 people, I guess, have been appointed by presidents who did not win the popular vote. I mean, aside from it not being democratic in the sense that nobody elects them, we have a Senate which 51% of the Senate is controlled by something like 18% of the population of the United States. Yeah, it is. Senate's also not particularly democratic either.
It's like anti-democratic to the power of anti-democratic.
Right, and it was set up that way. I mean, it wasn't until the 17th Amendment that we had even direct elections for the Senate. So 3 out of 4 Democrats say they're very motivated to turn out and vote in the midterms. 68% of the Republicans say they're very motivated. That's a substantial difference. And there's no reason to believe that a month from now, Democrats are going to be any less motivated. There's reason to believe that Republicans could be less motivated simply because they get further away from their success here.
The Democrats in North Dakota are really trying to hit Heidi Heitkamp with when she filmed her ad saying that she wasn't going to support Kavanaugh. Like, did she do it before or after the investigation? That's how they're trying to keep the issue alive. It's very desperate.
You mean the Republicans
are trying
right.
Yeah, sorry.
And now the problem is that some of those red states, we've got, I think, some of those red states, there's just more Republicans there, and they're more energized. There is some evidence that Heidi Heitkamp helped herself, and where folks like Kristen Sinema and Phil Bredesen hurt themselves by saying that were they in the Senate, they would have voted to confirm Kavanaugh. Manchin, it's hard to know, but I would imagine...
Can't touch me.
Yeah.
Go screw yourself.
Yeah. I mean, Manchin won his primary fairly handily. I think
She got about 30% of the vote. So, and in the state that Bernie won, there probably is some appetite to the more in some areas that are to the left of him. But he actually, if you watch him, he does a pretty good job of pretending that he cares about that stuff too.
Yes.
There's the reason he's so popular.
I think I spoke to Bob Kincaid from Head On at Netroots Nation, and he made a point of saying, you can't trust Manchin because he will just sell you out in a heartbeat. And I think that's the case. Again, though, I think that as Susan Collins votes against Kavanaugh, Manchin does too. This was sort of a free vote for him at that point. But I think, and he may have made the right calculation in terms of not being abandoned by his, or to the extent that he was, he makes it up in independence.
Democrats are much more forgiving than Republicans when you vote the way they don't want you to, right?
I think yes, to a certain extent. I mean, I don't know. It depends on what state you're in. But independent voters, far less supportive of the decision to confirm Kavanaugh. 47% say the Senate erred. 34% said it made the right decision. 36% of voters said it would make them less likely. I mean, I don't see necessarily the evidence of they may be less forgiving in terms of primaries, but they tend to come out during the general elections.
The Democrats?
No, the Republicans. I mean, now I don't know if I think the problem is that in the context of primaries is where you get Republicans are disciplined. And we have yet on the left to match that level of intensity.
Oh, yeah, because they're sociopathic. Like, do you think the Tea Party cared if they were hurting Republicans' chances in general elections?
Yes.
No. They were on a kamikaze mission, and they succeeded.
I think they do care, though.
Like,
I mean, they made some miscalculations in specific primaries, but then conversely, there's much more willingness for them to subordinate themselves to things like the court, as an example. And they've not let the perfect be the enemy of the good from their perspective.
Well, not in a primary. In the primaries,
no,
I mean,
the primary. That was in
examples.
2010. They made bad calculations.
Yeah,
like
for
you
sure.
don't
but
have
they still swept.
People like the guy who called in, like, you shouldn't run against a left candidate against Democrats in primaries because it'll hurt them in the general. They did not think about that.
No, the only problem that the Republicans had when they won with someone who's maybe like not a witch, or with Aiken. I mean, but I don't know that they didn't care about the chances in the general election as much as I think there is a disconnect from reality with some of those people, where there's a presumption that far more people agree with them than don't in those instances.
Well, it worked out very well for them. No?
I am all for the strategy of primarying, yes, and winning. The problem is that up to this point is that there's not enough people. Like I'm totally in favor of primarying someone like Manchin or Andrew Cuomo or Joe Lieberman. I mean, across the board. The problem is only insofar as like you don't win. I think the strategy of primarying and disciplining their politicians in that way has been a very effective one for the right, without a doubt. 36% of voters say it would make them less likely. 31% would be more likely to vote for a Kavanaugh-supporting Senate candidate. So, not a huge difference there. And, of course, again, this is national. So in a red state, very different numbers. But while that may help Heidi Heitkamp in the end of the day in North Dakota, there's also a plan B for Republicans in North Dakota. The Supreme Court, I guess as of yesterday, Kavanaugh had not quite been seated or participated in a 4-4 split decision. And when it's a 4-4 split decision at the Supreme Court, if it is deciding a case that has been, which it would have, come from a circuit court of appeals, the ruling of the circuit court, the appellate court, stands. And this is a case that came out of North Dakota. North Dakota in 2017, following Heidi Heitkamp's win in 2012, she won by less than 3,000 votes in North Dakota. 750,000 people in that state. I don't know how many are eligible voters. Matt, any guess? Yeah. I mean, obviously a fraction of 750. But 3,000 still represents a pretty incredibly small number of people. There's probably somewhere around 15,000 eligible Native American voters in North Dakota. The vast majority voted for Heidi Heitkamp. In 2017, a voter law ID was challenged by Native residents. In April of this year, a federal district court judge blocked large portions of the law as discriminatory against Native voters. Why? Because the law, as I guess first introduced by the governor, in North Dakota, there is no registration. You just show up to vote and you got to show an ID. So that's not necessarily an unreasonable thing. However, the North Dakota law said that you needed to have a street address on your driver's license. Now, you can get driver's licenses with P.O. boxes, addresses. In rural areas, when I lived upstate, we did not have a street address for our, we did not get mail delivery there because it was a rural area. You got to go to the post office and get it at the P.O. box. Well, apparently, on rural Indian communities, the Postal Service does not provide residential delivery. So tribal IDs, which are okay to vote with, use P.O. boxes, which under North Dakota law is not sufficient. So the IDs that they have are okay. It's just that the addresses they have are invalid. Yet they don't have residential addresses in terms of postal service. So a federal judge blocked a big part of that law because it's discriminatory against Native Americans who live in North Dakota, who almost as a rule do not have a residential address. The Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, however, allowed the law to go into effect. So during the primary, the law was not in the IDs that had P.O. boxes were okay. Then the Eighth Circuit subsequently allowed the law to go into effect. The Supreme Court, in splitting 4-4, upheld that ruling. Try and guess what the 4-4 split was. How could, though, the Eighth Circuit of Appeals look at this and not see that it's discriminatory in nature? There's no argument. First off, there's no argument that somehow a P.O. box makes it more likely that you could have a fraudulent ID. I guess the argument is that, like, well, you could get 3 P.O. boxes, but you can only have one address. I don't know who would do that to vote. They haven't found anybody who did that. But let's go over who what the composition of the Eighth Circuit Court is, just to give you a sense of why this stuff is relevant. There are 11 active and 6 senior judges. Levansky Smith, he's the chief judge. He was appointed by George W. Bush. Roger Leland Woolman, he was appointed by Ronald Reagan. James Loken was appointed by George Herbert Walker Bush. Steve Colclough, Culloton was appointed by George W. Bush. Raymond Grunder was appointed by George W. Bush. William Dwayne Benton was appointed by George W. Bush. Bobby Shepard was appointed by George W. Bush. Ralph Erickson was appointed by Trump. Stephen Grass was appointed by Trump. David Strass was appointed by Trump. And Jane Kelly, that's weird, she's the only woman on the entire court, was appointed by Barack Obama. And then, of course, there's 6 senior judges, and 2 were appointed by Reagan, and 4 were appointed by either Poppy or Junior Bush. So that's what happens, folks. That's the way this works.
Well, maybe if Hillary Clinton had called for a Green New Deal, then you don't have the fucking problem in the circuits.
I've got the map between where Heidi Heitkamp won in 2012. Let's see if we can find the reservations. So here is Fort Berthold. Down here is Standing Rock. Here is Turtle Mountain. This one is Spirit Lake, and then Sisseton down here. And the other thing to notice is this is all the rural areas here. This is farmers, and this is ranchers. Basically, and this is the college towns are on this side of the river too.
So there you have it. I mean, any place that is the bluest places are those reservations, and so this is a law that is completely geared. And there's one other group, now that you mention it, of people probably in that state who also don't have residential addresses, but rather have P.O. boxes on their IDs. College students. So this is a law that is completely geared towards making sure that Heidi Heitkamp doesn't win by disenfranchising Native voters and young voters in college. And that's it. End of story. Ball game. Doesn't matter.
Oh, don't forget poor people who might be moving from address to address.
Right.
You know who else could get 3 addresses? Rich people. Maybe they'll address that in the next session.
Unlikely. But the bottom line is, like, this is why structural stuff like this is so important. Because it doesn't matter what Heidi Heitkamp offers in terms of a platform. I mean, I think I shouldn't say that. But she can offer all sorts of things to folks, but if they can't vote, they can't vote. So that's the situation in North Dakota. And it very well may be that make the difference. I mean, end of story. Hopefully with a month left, they have made this decision. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I'd be curious if anybody out there who's in that neck of the woods has a sense of what is going to be done. I don't know how you issue 10,000 new IDs with street addresses. I don't know how that happens. But we'll see. We will look into that more and see if there's any other fix for something like that. But that's basically, that dynamic is what we're seeing across the country. It's no different than what we saw in Wisconsin with Milwaukee. Remember, Wisconsin, Clinton lost by 11,000 votes, 10,000 votes. There was far more than 10,000 votes that were suppressed in Wisconsin because of their voter ID law. Michigan, 7,000. As these laws get passed, there's a reason why they're passed. I mean, there's a reason why they do this. We will keep an eye on what's going on in North Dakota. The other story that's not getting much attention. Donald Trump theoretically, or at least in terms of name, changed the name of NAFTA. We'll see if that passes at any point. But in the meantime, Ford announces that they are laying off almost 12% of their workforce. 24,000 people. That's according to a report from Morgan Stanley. They have lost $1 billion because of the tariffs that President Trump imposed on metals and other goods. In addition, Kansas City Star reported yesterday that Ford has temporarily halted production of transit vans in Clay, Como, Missouri. It will leave 2,000 workers idle for about 3 or 4 weeks. The best part of this story, not the best part, the most disturbing part, this is from Fortune.com, incidentally. Despite the news of the layoffs, Ford stock closed down 3.4%. They see the way that works, right? Layoffs are supposed to raise the value of the stocks. Yep. That's
exactly how it was written.
Shareholder value. Shareholder value.
What more do you want us to do? We destroyed a bunch of people's livelihoods.
Now, the loss of 24,000 jobs, there is an algorithm out there. I'm not exactly sure what it is off the top of my head, but I was more aware of it back in the day when the auto industry was threatened before the Obama bailout of a couple of these enterprises. And for every person who works in a auto plant, there's at least 1 or 2 other people who work in subsidiary jobs that either service the plant or provide for the cars that are being built in and around Michigan or Ohio. I may be making, the upholstery for the seats or something, or a knob for the radio, whatever it is. And so these tariffs, I mean, it may make people feel good, but it's not helping. Lastly, I want to talk about this story, and then maybe we'll take a phone call or something. But this Saudi story, well, let's go to this, because this is going to make, this is pretty messed up. We have a situation where, and there's still more, oh yeah, right, I forgot about that. Shoot. Oh, folks, let me tell you about this. Have you ever been to an escape room?
No, I haven't. Have you?
No. Have you guys? There's one off of Flatbush that I've been thinking about going to.
Yeah, I always walk past that.
Little team building exercise.
Oh my gosh, we should do that.
I think dinner would be better.
I think we should do that. We should videotape it and put it on YouTube. That would be pretty funny, actually.
See who gets the most frustrated with.
I think we're going to have a mandatory escape room thing. If you don't know, I don't know. Are these things in other cities?
Yeah, they're definitely in other cities.
They're kind of a new thing, though, aren't they? Like
yeah, but they're around.
Years?
I talked to somebody who did one in Portland the other day.
All right, so apparently they're like you get locked in a dark room and you got to try and figure out how to get out. But if you love the thrill of an escape room, looking for clues, solving puzzles, now you can bring the mystery home with a Hunt a Killer. Hunt a Killer is a monthly subscription where you become a detective immersed in a murder mystery. Each month, a fictional serial killer will send you cryptic clues, objects, and letters that you can actually use to solve the crime in real time.
Who did it?
I'm glad they indicate that it's a fictional serial killer.
Yeah, that's clarifying.
Right.
If it's not a real one, I'm not interested.
Well, it's so interactive, though, Jamie. It feels real. It's perfect to play solo, on a date, game night with friends, or join the online community and work with other people who are at the same point in the story as you are. This is pretty awesome. I've actually been contemplating getting Mila into something like this. I mean, it's not gory.
Who did it? We need to find out, DC.
Right now, for our listeners, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. They only accept 200 members per day, so hurry up to take advantage of this offer. That's huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. huntakiller.com/majority. Check that out. Here is Donald Trump, and they're very concerned, I think, about the numbers for Trump. Wrote an op-ed, I guess. I don't even know how to characterize this. An op-ed was written with Trump's name attached to it. It was put in the USA Today. It is so full of lies and prevarications. I mean, I want to know if I'm eligible to write an op-ed that says that people are being lined up and shot every dawn in the backyard of the White House.
Well, not yet, but when I did see the story about the embassy in Saudi Arabia, I literally got an erection. MBS is so cool.
We'll talk more about that in the fun half, but they are freaking out a little bit. And here is Trump at an Iowa rally, warning people of the left-wing mob ahead of the midterms. Here he is in Council Bluffs, Iowa. What's the green hats about? Do we know? Is that I don't think it is. I don't. Doesn't. Oh, Make America Great with the John Deere motif. Is that it? All right.
You have the chance to stop the radical Democrats by electing a Republican House and a Republican Senate. Democrats have become totally unhinged. They've gone crazy. The Democrats have become too extreme. And they've become, frankly, too dangerous to govern. They've gone wacko. You don't hand matches to an arsonist, and you don't give power to an angry left-wing mob, and that's what the Democrats have become.
Now, if you're asking yourself, what does a left-wing mob sound like? Well, of course, it sounds... slightly different than this mob at that same speech.
How about Senator Feinstein? That's another beauty. That's a beauty. Did you leak the documents? What? No, I didn't. Did we leak? Did we leak? No. And I think they're talking about Feinstein. Can you believe it?
Yeah. There you go, folks.
A rare form.
Trump Pence 2020, lock all the women up.
I wish the Democrats were an angry left-wing mob.
No kidding.
That would be sick.
That would be nice, but it's pretty impressive. I think that they're going to lock her up is going to be, that's their calling card.
Got to play the hits.
Got to play the hits. Got to play the hits.
It almost reminded me of Drain the Swamp in terms of how he accidentally finds something. Because when they started saying lock her up after Feinstein, he had a second of wait, what did she? Yeah, her too. Also Pocahontas.
Yeah, I think he was pretty excited about that. I think he just realized, oh my God, if Warren runs, lock her up.
Lock her up. Lock her up.
But he's totally going to do that.
Yes.
We need a countdown clock to Trump doing that.
My opponent.
No, I was going to say that this morning, but I'm pretty sure he did that in 2016.
He already did that.
Of course. Of course he did.
Here is Rand Paul. This is the theme that they really want to push in the wake of this Kavanaugh thing because they are afraid. Look, it is clear, I think, even to the Republican leaders, and the issue is that they just don't have as much compunction about it anymore. That the only thing that animates their voters is either an animosity towards a woman or animosity towards a black person or animosity towards women or black people or, to be fair, also brown people. And they're desperately trying to make it seem like they're also under assault from just Democrats in general. It's not quite as effective. It's much easier for them to be under this, because a woman who comes out and simply says, it was inappropriate for this guy to assault me or to attempt to rape me, that is enough to get the fire lit under conservatives, because they feel completely aggrieved. Generic Democrats, it doesn't quite do it in the same way. And so they have to up the level of assault that supposedly is going on. Here's Rand Paul speaking of that on the Leland Conway show on WHAS in Kentucky.
Talked to your wife just yesterday about the op-ed she wrote asking some of the, I guess, cooler heads in the Democratic Party, Cory Booker in particular, to call on his party to stop this, to stop fomenting this rabid reaction where, you know, you've been chased around airports. Senator McConnell, who was just on with us, was chased out of restaurants, and Senator Cruz was chased out of a restaurant, and then people that aren't even elected officials, like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, chased out of restaurants. And we've got members of the Democratic Party calling for more of that and asking people to stay in that mode. This is dangerous.
I think what people need to realize that when people like Cory Booker say get up in their face, he may think that that's okay, but what he doesn't realize is that for about every
Pause it for 1 second. Now, somebody got off the script because Leland said, like, cooler heads like Cory Booker. And then Rand thought that Cory Booker was the problem, because Leland forgets that in Rand's world, you've got to motivate the voters by talking about the black guy. They got confused, but nevertheless, I nitpick.
But what he doesn't realize is that for about every 1,000 person that might want to get up in your face, one of them is going to be unstable enough to commit violence. When I was at the ball field and Steve Scalise was nearly killed, the guy shooting up the ball field and shooting, I think 5 or 6 people were shot. Steve Scalise was almost killed. He was yelling, "This is for health care." He had a list in his pocket of conservative Republicans that he wanted to kill. You know, when I was attacked in my yard.
All right, pause it. Okay, stop it. We don't need to hear any more from this. Where could someone have possibly gotten the notion that the idea that you can go and take your gun to go shoot at members of our government because you don't like what they're doing? Oh, what's this? Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Rand Paul's tweet from June 23rd, 2016. Why do we have a Second Amendment? It's not to shoot deer. It's to shoot at the government when it becomes tyrannical.
That was a figure of speech in a certain sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's one thing when you're tweeting about your dad and guns and super predators, and then it's quite another when you blow leaves in your neighbor's lawn and he needs to kick your ass.
Do you remember that?
I love how ironically Rand Paul has actually been physically assaulted for violating somebody else's property rights.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Bad libertarian.
But I wonder, I mean, I still can't get out of my head the massive media tour that Rand Paul did following the murder of Heather Heyer and by right-wing conservatives who were trying to celebrate the heritage of the Confederacy. I mean, the image of him running around doing all those interviews still emblazoned in my mind.
Maybe I would have if my goddamn neighbor hadn't broken my ribs. Super concerned about civility and violence and all of that sort of stuff. But, you know, by the same token, that bitch had it coming.
He does imply elsewhere in that interview that the reasons his neighbor attacked him were political.
Like maybe it was more like on a neighborhood politics dispute.
Yeah. I mean,
The neighborhood politics of I hate you because you're one of the most annoying people on the planet Earth and you live next to me and I'm going to tackle you on a ride. I tell you, what was the goal? It was get Ronnie Casseroles and like an active, like somebody doing like landless movement in India, add Ron Paul's neighbor as like liberation heroes.
All right, go ahead.
Like I'm not endorsing that particular act of violence. I think armed insurrections only work when it's a critical mass of people. But if you want to talk about violence, the number of people who have been murdered by GOP policy just by being denied health care, like, violence begets violence.
Without a doubt. But it really does seem to be the talking point that the Republicans are pushing. Here's Kellyanne Conway. Remember, her boss is Donald Trump. We beat him up. It's okay to beat him up. If you get sued, I will pay for your lawsuit. I mean, we all remember Donald Trump, right? Kellyanne Conway is really upset about the lack of civility.
It didn't win, and that was Hillary Clinton. And many people are saying, let's be civil, let's get along, let's unify. But Hillary Clinton, she's agreeing with the Maxine Waters of the world, it appears. Listen to this next soundbite. She's saying civility is not an option.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and or the Senate, that's when civility can start again.
Well, what does that mean exactly?
Pause it for 1 second. I'll tell you what it means. It's a delusion. It's the same delusion that Barack Obama had. Once we win, they'll learn their lesson. Or once they win, the fever will break.
What it means
they
is...
had it both ways. There was no way the fever wasn't going to break. But as far as Clinton's concerned, if we win back the House, according to her, then the Republicans will be civil. That's a joke, of course. But let's hear how the Fox and Friends folks and Conway interpret this.
Well, what does that mean exactly, Kellyanne?
Look, usually when she opens her mouth respectfully, she offends at least one half of the country, and she did it again. But I think her discourse now is a little bit dangerous. I don't like the implications there. It's one thing to call us deplorable, irredeemable, laugh at people who don't have all the privileges.
The other night, I mean, not that I'm terribly sensitive about this, but I think Donald Trump called the Democrats evil.
Yeah, but with love.
Laugh at people who don't have all the privileges that she has had with her Ivy League law degree and through her marriage to a much more popular man who actually was a two-term president that she'll never be. I don't like that kind of talk, and I avoid it. My boss has called for civility. He's said that he represents all Americans. We don't run around asking people what their party affiliation is when he's cutting their taxes and allowing their small businesses to be free of regulations and growth. We're impervious to that.
What? But this is the line that they're pushing out because they're desperate. There's a little bit of desperation here.
Well, one part of that was true. Much more popular. Boom.
That was a really good burn, I gotta say.
That was
Just
very,
like,
very bitchy.
she's such a good mean girl.
Yeah.
They are. I like the every time she opens her mouth, respectfully.
Right. But they're moving into the aggrievement posture now because there's, which I think is encouraging, at least in terms of what they're prepared to run on. Right now, like I said, I think I headlined this was Tammy Baldwin introduced a discharge petition, which basically is going to force the Senate on voting on a bill that would overturn the Trump administration's expansion of so-called junk insurance plans. These are plans that under the Affordable Care Act could exist for 2 or 3 months at a time. And you could sign up for these one time if you were transitioning between plans. They are regulated by the states, and so therefore they don't have the federal minimum standards for what health insurance can be. Trump expanded these to where you could have them for a year at a time, and you could renew, I think, up to 3 years. So Baldwin filed a discharge petition, which basically does an end round around. It's a parliamentary procedure which forces a vote. They will take the vote. It will focus on vulnerable Republicans who will either vote to support plans that allow for denial of coverage under pre-existing conditions, that don't cover all sorts of healthcare issues, or they'll vote against it and they'll force Donald Trump to veto the bill, or they'll get rid of it. This is, this has been, I think, not a coincidence that as soon as the Kavanaugh thing passes, they are going to pivot to healthcare, the Democrats. And in the meantime, what the Republicans will do is say that these Democrats are super mean.
Yeah, like that Hillary Clinton clip just now was kind of the epitome of the fact that no matter what the Democrats do, the Republicans are going to act like they're crazy leftist pitchfork carrying mob. So like, might as well give them that,
Trump's op-ed claims that the Democratic proposal of Medicare for all would eliminate Medicare as we know it. So in other words, Medicare for all will make Medicare not for seniors anymore.
Then it becomes Venezuela.
Right. I mean, this is the type of, it's absurd, but that's the way it works. Folks, just a reminder, Hunt a Killer is a monthly subscription that sends you cryptic clues, objects, and letters so you can solve a crime in real time. It's so interactive that it feels real. Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. They only accept 200 members per day, so hurry to take advantage of this offer. I'll tell you something. A lot of people are looking for some type of hobby to basically mitigate the intensity of the era. Hunting a killer might be not a bad way to do it.
Who did it? I don't know. There's clues.
But look, they only accept 200 members per day, so hurry to take advantage of this offer. That's huntakiller.com/majority for 10% off your first box. huntakiller.com/majority. I'm going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. It is Wednesday. Last night was Tuesday. Michael was sick yesterday, so there was no show.
Well, there was no.
Oh, you did make it.
I didn't do the warm-up show.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. I wasn't sure because you were so sick yesterday.
I think I told you in the text that I had a mild cold.
I generally don't read past the first line.
That's cool.
Of your text.
That's another thing that we share in common about our communication.
That's why I only write one line.
That's good.
Can you please? Hello.
Well, so what did you?
Alex Perrine was in studio. We talked about Democratic Party. If it wanted to win, what would it do? There was a lot of fallout from the first round of voting in Brazil, which of course tacked on to the coverage we've been giving it for a while. Bernie gave a great foreign policy speech where he even did one of these for Lula da Silva with his when he got up and he was like, unjustly imprisoned.
Lula would have won.
Lula would have won, you pricks. And also, so we sort of connected a thread on that. And somebody pointed my attention that on top of everything else, Jimmy Dore even had a dumb segment on the car wash investigation, which led to the rise of a fascist candidate in Brazil and the imprisonment of Lula. So even there was a dumb segment to be commented on. And I tried to resist commenting on it and then did not resist it. And then we're like, let's do it in the post game. And then Matt was like, let's do it in the main show. So we did that.
There you go.
Yeah, it was a very good show.
And Jamie, did you do a segment on him or no?
Not this time.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But we did do a lot of other things this week on a spooky Halloween intifada.
Why are you doing a Halloween intifada in the first week of October?
Halloween lasts the whole month for me. All right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I did not realize that.
Yeah. So we had our friend Jacob Blumenfeld recently got his doctorate from the New School. We're just doing that for every Jew now.
Yes. Well, if it's that kind of name, I mean, come on. Jacob Blumenfeld.
Doctor's Bones and Blumenfeld.
I went to the New School to study communism.
Indeed, he did. He's got a book on the German philosopher Max Stirner coming out on Zero Books. We also have Dr. Bones, who is a bit of a swamp warlock. He got his doctorate in a graveyard and lives by Stirner's radical, egoist, communist philosophy. We brought them together, folks, for Socratic dialogue and to find out what happens when leftists stop being polite and start getting egoist.
And Matt, did you do a Halloween show too?
Yeah, we did a spooky version of a review of Corey Robbins' The Reactionary Mind.
That actually is pretty spooky.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And for patrons, I'm going to finish Hope Leslie Volume 1. The full audio, the first half of the audiobook should be up tonight, maybe tomorrow.
Scary.
Patreon.com/literary hangover.
Patreon.com/TMBS. I forgot.
Very good.
I forgot. That's how people find it. They find it at patreon.com/TMBS.
Oh, yes. And the same, patreon.com/theantifada.
All right, folks. We're going to take a quick break.
Oh, my God. People actually tell their websites. It's so ridiculous.
All right, folks. We're going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half. Don't forget, join themajority.report.com. See you in a sec. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, the number is 646-257-3920. Going to start up the IMs and the Skypes. Credit where credit is due. We gave Rand Paul a a little bit of grief for.
You razzed me.
We razzed him.
I couldn't laugh. Sorry, my ribs are so bruised. I can't laugh at your hilarious Jew humor. Fuck you, Majority Report. Fuck each and every one of you. Yeah, I'll take a soundtrack for it.
We
Friggin' weed head.
We
water
mocked
boat.
him for his concern about the rabid left Democrats who are walking the knife's edge in terms of creating a potential violent situation in our country. But to his credit, he went on in that same conversation, I think, or he went on to Fox and Friends, and in the wake of the report that the Saudis basically ambushed a Saudi national journalist who is a U.S. resident, Jamal Khashoggi, as he went to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, ostensibly to get marriage papers, which apparently U.S. intelligence services had at least some inkling they were out to kill him. He was apparently either killed or disappeared in that consulate. Saudis don't seem to care, and that anybody else knows. There's nothing that, as far as they're concerned, can be done about it. Rand Paul is talking about pulling support for Saudi Arabia. Particularly, there is now a bipartisan group of senators. Remember last time support for Saudi Arabia was up, I think it was 53 to 47 in terms of the Senate voting to maintain support for the Saudis. There were 5 Democrats, if I remember correctly.
Arms sales,
Sales.
specifically.
Nelson, McCaskill, Donnelly, Warner, and Manchin, who voted in favor of that sale of arms to Saudi Arabia. There is a bipartisan group of lawmakers who have sent a letter to Mike Pompeo, including Senator formerly moderate Susan Collins, Chris Murphy, Todd Young, others, who have signed on to a letter basically saying, end our support for Saudi's blockade and assault on Yemen. And here's Rand Paul making that case on Fox and Friends, and apparently really getting under the skin of, which one was it?
Kilmeade.
Kilmeade.
The noted scholar of American and Islamic history.
Kilmeade.
So it's sort of Clash of the Titans.
Kilmeade is long in on the Infinite War stock, apparently, and so he doesn't want to hear any of this talk.
I'm of the opinion we need to have a strong national defense. We need to balance our budget, but we don't need to be in everybody's civil war. I think the president agrees with me.
Well, the only problem is when we leave Iraq, in comes ISIS. If we leave Afghanistan, out comes Al Qaeda, and then buildings start falling here. So you got to be responsible.
Well, the other half of that, Brian, though, is we went into Afghanistan, we toppled the regime we went into Iraq, toppled the regime there, and guess what? It made Iran stronger. So really, we tipped the balance of power in favor of Iran when we went into Iraq. So we have to think of the unintended consequences of always intervening in everyone's civil war.
I want to remind Brian Kilmeade, it's quite a while ago, he may not remember, but the reason why, in his mind, if we leave Iraq, then the terrorists move in, is because we invaded Iraq. And I want to remind him they were in no way involved whatsoever with 9/11. To the contrary. I mean, literally to the contrary. They were hostile to Al Qaeda. But,
and it's not like we've defeated the terrorists now.
It's a small
in
detail.
Any of these places.
Small details.
Reminding Brian Kilmeade, it feels like reminding a cat about
exactly.
something.
But here, let's continue.
So we have to think of the unintended consequences of always intervening in everyone's civil war.
Well, we don't always intervene in everyone's civil war.
Well, we're involved in about 7 civil wars right now.
Can we just go back there? Because Rand Paul almost laughs at how childish of a response that is. Did you say A? Like we're A or an? Did you say A or an? That is the level. We're not in every single civil war.
Such a liar.
Iran when we went into Iraq. So we have to think of the unintended consequences of always intervening in everyone's civil war.
Well, we don't always intervene in everyone's civil war.
Well, we're involved in about 7 civil wars right now, and particularly.
But okay, only 7.
Right.
But there happens to be
yourself.
16. It's like not even half.
So there's only 7 civil wars happening. You yourself just contradicted yourself.
Exactly.
And then buildings come down when people do that.
I bet you that's over half of the current civil wars. I bet you we're involved in over half.
That's probably
just a guess.
Particularly the Yemen civil war.
We
There's
just can't
17
give
million
Iran
people.
and Russia the Middle East.
There's 17 million people in Yemen living on the edge of starvation. They had the largest cholera outbreak in
maybe
modern
Iran should
history.
stop aiding the Houthi rebels.
Well, this is because the Saudis are blockading Yemen. We are aiding and abetting them. In the last couple of weeks, the Saudis bombed a school bus with 50 children. We should not be arming the Saudis. And my bill today will stop sending arms.
That was a
to the
mistake.
Saudis.
And what about, should we give Yemen to Iran? Would that be better?
No, I think we should understand that the world's a little more complicated than that, Brian, that there's civil war there with many different factions in Yemen, and this isn't Iran.
There really isn't a single scholar who makes an argument that Iran has a serious presence in Yemen or influence, as opposed to, let's say, Syria. But the idea that we would give Yemen to Iran, like, okay, then what?
That's what I proposed in the Iran deal. Would you guys like Yemen on top of it? Anything we could do to facilitate your nuclear program, and if you want Yemen, just let me know.
What is Iran doing with Yemen?
It's called the Bill of Transfer.
So does that make up for Stuxnet?
Yeah, whatever you need. Hey, Stuxnet was our bad. God knows the goddamn Jews were involved in it. They got their own friggin' Jew country. How about a right of transfer to Yemen?
They'll turn Yemen into a some type of like resort place, right? Yeah, that's what the Iranian resort coast, like the Iranian Côte d'Azur, will be Yemen.
Right. The Houthis, basically the extent to which Iran has strongly supported the Houthis is after this started.
After it started, and to the extent that they've supported, it is like maybe nominal, maybe some money, but it's not like they have advisors on the ground or any serious troop presence.
It's its own group that has its own factions in Yemen. And basically, Obama administration actually did pretty much just say, like, hey, we pissed you guys off with the Iran deal. Can we let you just obliterate and do mass murder in Yemen if we look the other way? And then Trump, of course, accelerated it because in a classic way, like the Obama administration let it happen. It was abysmal, but they kept some restrictions on it in terms of what weapons were sold. Like, okay, guys, we're going to kill a bunch of people, but we're not going to kill absolutely everybody. And then with Kushner and Trump, it's turned. And that's, I mean, I get what Rand Paul's doing. Like, I understand he's on the president's favorite show and he's trying to deliver him a message. But, like, I think the president agrees with me on this.
Not quite.
No. I think the president's quite on board for the mass murder of Yemen.
I think we should understand.
I got a hotel in the offing, so I mean.
Yeah, there's a hotel in it.
My hands are tied.
Also, Mohammed bin Salman's he's really cool. He's cool.
Did you see the orb? Did you see the orb? Good.
Steak. And what about, should we give Yemen to Iran? Would that be better?
No, I think we should understand that the world's a little more complicated than that, Brian, that there's civil war there with many different factions in Yemen. And this isn't Iran, the U.S., and Saudi Arabia. There are many different factions in Yemen. They will continue to fight.
You're oversimplifying, Senator.
Well, no, the Sunnis and the Shia have been at war with each other for 1,000 years. They will be at war with each other in another 1,000 years. It doesn't mean we always have to
I love how they're both accusing each other of oversimplifying. Like you said you're oversimplifying, not me. I'm not the one who's oversimplifying. You're oversimplifying.
You are.
What I don't like is Rand Paul did fall into the essentialist. It's been happening for thousands of years. But on the other hand, it is amazing when one guy is like, well, actually, there's a multi-party conflict here, which implicates the Saudis, but also the Emirates. Iran has its own strategic interest. You're oversimplifying it. That's so awesome.
I
It's
think
like you're talking about all the parties involved. You're oversimplifying it, asshole.
I think Kilmeade is actually saying, like, it sounds so simple for you. Like, you know all the names of the countries.
Oh, yeah, it's that easy, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's as easy as just getting out and
Let's
out.
watch how pissy he
We
gets
can
at
watch
the
that
end.
second. Yeah, we'll watch that whole section again.
Right.
Sending arms
That was a
to the
mistake. And what about, should we give Yemen to Iran? Would that be better?
No, I think we should understand that the world's a little more complicated than that, Brian, that there's civil war there with many different factions in Yemen. This isn't Iran, the U.S., and Saudi Arabia.
Right.
There are many different factions in Yemen. They will continue to fight.
Oversimplifying, Senator.
Well, no, the Sunnis and the Shia.
Pause it. You know what's really also uncomfortable? I don't know why we're spending so much time on this, but watching Ducey and is that Ashley Ainsley or Ainsley?
Ashley Ainsley. That's
whatever.
exactly
Ainsley,
who it is.
Ashley,
It's
whatever.
Ashley Ainsley.
Just sitting there, like just stone face, like not moving, like, oh, I gotta let Kilmeade. He really doesn't like Iran.
They can smell Kilmeade's anger sweat.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Cut away.
Shia have been at war with each other for 1,000 years. They will be at war with each other in another 1,000 years. It doesn't mean we always have to intercede.
Okay. Senator.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's also
You're right.
simple for you because you know names of countries. Yeah, and by the way, they apologized for bombing the school bus and murdering kids.
That
Maybe
was a
you should give them-
mistake.
and literally, the Saudis' explanation was the two people that we were trying to kill that we thought were in the school bus weren't in it. So I guess our bad.
Right.
There wasn't a blanket like, we're horrified that we murdered a bus full of school children. It was we had some inaccurate intelligence that would have totally justified murdering a bunch of kids.
Absolutely. Calling from a 301 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, is that you?
Yes. Who's this?
It's Vito from Maryland. How's it going?
Vito from Maryland. What's going on?
So, thought I'd give just a sort of a real quick prediction here on the midterms. I'm looking at something like maybe 223 to 212, something like that in the House, and I think it'll probably be like 53-47 in the Senate when it's all said and done. And I don't know, I kind of feel like any gains that are sort of made here really are not a rejection of GOP policies. I mean, I think that after everything is said and done, really, I mean, I think people are a little bit angry about misogyny and racism and those kind of things. But if you really look at I mean, I don't really think there's any real rejection here on the part of the American people on any of these policies. And I think they would have been fine with Brett Kavanaugh if it wasn't for the allegations. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I think historically, at least over the last 50 years, the electorate is basically conservative, and I mean that not in the sense of any particular policies, but in a sense of sort of not for any real change conservative. In other words,
well, Vito, let me ask you this: what are you basing this on? I mean, I think your argument has some validity in terms of degree, but the Democrats clearly, indisputably, all the reporting from people who've gone from district to district, we can see it in the Senate, they're running on health care, right? Now, they're not running on necessarily a dramatic change in health care because they're not in a position to institute it, but I would say the majority, at least of the high-profile races, people are embracing Medicare for all. But certainly they're running against the Republican plans for health care. I don't think that, broadly speaking, the American public votes on an ideology. They vote on certain issues that basically, you know, and not even on issues that often. I think, you know, the majority of Americans don't pay that much attention to politics, and so their cues are pretty superficial. But so what?
Right, I agree.
But my response to that is, so what?
Well, I mean, I think it's indicative of, I mean, in terms of any type of real significant change, toward progressive policies, it doesn't bode well.
No, I
think-
disagree. Because look, there is the way that policies get changed towards the right or towards the left is not because 70 or 80% of the population is totally engaged and is looking forward to this. No, that's not. It's actually a very small percentage of the population wants a certain program, and they figure out a way of how to essentially leverage the power they have, expand upon it, and get people into a position where those changes can be made. And so it doesn't matter that 80% of the population isn't on board for a radical reform of the way that America is going. All that matters is that people who are elected see that there is that people who want a program like expanded, like Medicare for all, let's say, expanded Social Security, free college, that they have the ability to move the electorate. That's the way it works. So it doesn't matter. What you're saying doesn't matter. There's never been a time where they've been one way or another.
Well, I don't know. You might be right. I don't know. I just think that, historically speaking, typically it's people only tend to usually vote for any type of change if there's some sense of something seriously wrong in one way or another. In other words, I don't think that if Donald Trump wasn't elected in 2016 and instead it was, Jeb Bush maybe. I mean, do you think that we'd be talking about a blue wave?
If Jeb Bush
honestly,
if Jeb Bush had been the nominee, if Jeb Bush was the nominee, I don't think that we would. I think the Democrats would be in power.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, if we had if there was a different one of those guys that had won, one of those other 16 Republicans.
But if the country was willing to vote for Jeb Bush, do I think there would be interest in policies that would be pushing to the left? No, because it would be a different situation. It's like if I had wings.
That's the only point I'm trying to make.
But that's not really a point. It doesn't make sense.
If I had wings, I would fly.
Honestly, that's what you're saying, Vito.
Do you think people didn't think they were voting for change when they voted for Trump?
I think this is what I think. I think that once the nomination process was over, that those people that voted for Trump, they were going to vote for whoever had the R next to their name. Okay, I think that they have the right has a more cohesive coalition than the left does.
Well, I mean, I don't even know. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, they have a couple of attributes that are almost identical to each other, right? I mean, we're talking about a 95% white party. We're talking about maybe, a large, to the extent there's any large differences, it's like, well, I identify as a Christian, but I go to church, as opposed to I identify with a Christian and I don't go to church. Then there's, and then there's like some slight differences in terms of economic class, but I mean, I think they're more cohesive. I think they voted. I think a lot of people voted, either for tax cuts or for the Supreme Court or both on the right. But they, I think the bottom line is that you can't say that it doesn't matter. I mean, what you're saying is, we don't know. The only thing that we do know is that, at least on the broad left, people don't engage as much usually in midterms unless they're voting against something. I mean, that's the case. But that does not in any way implicate how people can govern. It doesn't. If there is a sense that, I mean, that's why the base of the Republican Party, A, was able to discipline their politicians, and B, was able to grow.
Act like a Republican. Read that Michael Kunikin. Seriously, Michael Kunikin had Knukin. I can never pronounce the last name, but he had a really good piece in Current Affairs that came out in 2016, and it was something to the effect. I had him on. You can look it up on this show. But the title of the piece was like, Republicans are ruthless, savage power players, and I respect them for it. And it was all about how, Democrats, both the politicians, consulting class, but even the electorate, have been trained to, have this very small bore view of things. But Republicans don't, and that's how they're, winning with even issues that they have no support on, in terms of things like healthcare.
Let me just say this, and I appreciate the call, Vito, but, a lot of people for a long time when I was on Air America were like, all you're doing is you're talking to the chorus. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. But I got news for you. It's the choir that does most of the work. It's the choir that does most of the change. The choir goes out and they get other people to, show up at the bake sale. But the choir are the people who bake the cookies. And getting people to, come to your bake sale and buy a brownie, it's not easy, this thing to do, but they don't have to be fully invested in the whole project to go and eat a brownie. I mean, this is not a profound idea. I think Martin Luther King said, give me 5 or 10, I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but he give me 5, 10, 15% of the people. And maybe I think it was 10. I don't even think it was 15.
I think it was 10.
You give me 10% of the people who are committed, and it can change anything.
And he also said, you can't make jokes on college campuses anymore.
That's true.
That's what Dave Rubin, my young friend, has said. And he just wants to talk about ideas, which increasingly you can't do on the left.
Are you saying that voting is like a box of chocolates?
I'm not sure I follow that, but...
Never mind.
I know. But...
You never know what you're going to get?
No, I'm not saying that. No.
He said, hello, he gets it. He goes, no.
No.
That's not what I said.
I'm saying that, well, you know what? Yes.
No.
Yes, actually, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
I think to a certain extent. I think that, to a certain extent, look, you can't, your vote does not guarantee that the politician's going to deliver what they said they were going to deliver, right? I mean, Donald Trump ran on, I'm not going to touch Medicare, I'm not going to touch Social Security. They certainly would have tried to. He, I think to a large extent, people were like, oh, infrastructure. That was the big, we were going to see a big infrastructure bill. The voting is a little bit like a box of chocolates, but here's how it's different. You can influence what is inside the box, not necessarily by voting, but that certainly helps. So it's not you, you're rolling the dice. After you roll the dice, you can then go down and walk towards the dice and change the number on it. I mean, people have to be involved, but there's a possibility there that doesn't exist in the same way when you get a cellophane wrapped thing about chocolate.
Yeah,
wow, you included a dice metaphor.
I was being silly, and you did well with
I
that.
teased that one out.
I mean,
I didn't understand it at first, but I understand what you're saying. Like, you don't know what you're going to get. But the fact of the matter is that you don't know what you're going to get, except for the differences with the box of chocolates. You can actually influence what chocolates are in there.
I mean, I think we also have to remember that the base is increasingly polarized, and the base of the Republican Party is pretty far to the right, and the Republican Party likes that, and they're using it because, it goes along with their program of trying to make laws that are favorable to the ruling class, to bosses, to the people who own the means of production, blah, blah, blah. Whereas the Democrats' base is far to the left of them, but they don't really like that. Because
I'm not convinced that that's actually the case. I mean, I don't know. The base of the Republican Party is, I think, if you look at it in terms of just sheer numbers, I mean, we're talking about African American women and women, broadly speaking. And I'm not convinced that ideologically they're that much further to the left than your average Democrat.
If you look at the policies that they support, they are consistently to the left of establishment Democrats.
I would say...
And not to mention all the people who don't currently vote, who might vote if they were presented with a program that appealed to them.
Okay. But if you don't vote for the Democratic Party, then you can't be part of the base of the Democratic Party. If you don't vote, you're definitionally not part of the base.
All right, I guess I'm talking about voters in general then. But like
well,
the
if you
Democrats,
don't vote, you're not a voter either.
Or potential voters, which is the Democrats' job to get them to vote for them.
I think the challenge for people like us is to make it so that the base of the Democratic Party is actually both engaged and far to the left of the of where, I mean, I think the center of the party has moved to the left, but even, continues to do that. I mean, I think that's the problem is not just with the Democrats. The problem is with the base of the Democratic Party of like if all these people who are too disaffected from the Democratic Party because they're to the left of it, came and voted for the leftmost candidate in the primary, then it would be a different situation. I mean, you see that in the context of AOC. I mean, it's, we're talking about a small election. Obviously, it's a primary and it's in a safe district, but her election is pulling the party to the left. And the engagement that she inspired, or that, but are we going to leave it up to the politicians? I mean, that's the thing is that, to a certain extent, there's a lot of complaining about the politicians, but there's the problem is that we're not seeing as much from the would-be base of the Democratic Party as we see from the base of the Republican Party.
But AOC said she would vote for Andrew Cuomo, so it's fucking done.
Well, you can't just blame the voters.
I'm not just blaming the voters.
I'm not lack of progressives in the Democratic Party.
I'm not just blaming the voters.
Powerful forces.
I'm not just
pulling the Democrats to the right.
I understand,
and they're
that.
being torn in two directions, which is something the Republicans don't have to deal with.
I understand.
Right? They
that.
have their big donors. They are a capitalist political party.
I'm aware of all of that. But I'm not just blaming the voters, but I'm saying that they also, the Democratic voter does not generally vote as much in off-year elections as Republicans. That's just a fact. Now, maybe it's because the Republican politicians are that much better, but it's, it can't go both ways. It can't go, it's like, on one hand, it's like, we don't want to trust our politicians. We know that we're jaded about them, but then we want them to do all these things. It's like voting's not that important, right? Well, then the activism should be, and I'm not saying it isn't, but the activism should be in getting more people who are disaffected involved. And if they are, the idea of just going and pulling a lever shouldn't be that big of a deal, and it can make a big difference.
It's my new book called Blaming the Voters by Sam Seder.
But
the reason that we have all of these problems is because of these goddamn voters. Either they're voting or not voting. It's all their fault. If they would read about the Supreme Court on their stupid phones instead of playing Candy Crush, then we might have a halfway decent society living again. There's probably some truth to that. It's all in my new book, Blaming the Voters by Sam Seder.
Voting is fine. I will concede that. Certainly, I have a leftist show
Slightly
where I tell people to
than
vote.
fun.
Okay, I tell anarchists to vote for what it might do. But has that gotten us where we want to be yet?
Well, the
no.
base of the society
you also have
is
to
not
look
like
at the outside factors, the powerful outside factors that are acting on these things. And for the Republican Party, it's capital, right? It's the people who have the money, the people who pull the strings. And for the I don't even want to say for the Democrats. For the left, it's workers and it's our labor and it's our ability to withhold our labor, our ability to get people out in the streets. Now, it's like David and Goliath, right? These aren't really evenly matched forces, but regular people throughout history have been able to win the things that we have now as concessions in a fight for total liberation.
Yeah, I agree.
Like whatever we have remaining of the welfare state, we got that because regular people stood up for themselves.
Exactly.
And not just through voting.
Exactly.
And maybe if they'd stand up for themselves again instead of being mouth-breathing fucking morons who don't vote, we might actually get somewhere as a society, which is all in my new book.
I agree. That's
Blaming the Electorate with Sam Seder.
Listen, it is. I agree. I mean, FDR was doing capital a favor with Social Security. But there has to be a dynamic where there's that sense that, like a Republican's not going to intercede in that way. A Democrat will. But there needs to be a force that is terrifying them. So we agree on that.
We need a real Labor Party with class independence in this country, and we don't have one yet.
Yes, but why does it even have to be a party?
Well, I'm actually agnostic on that because electoralism isn't really my area of focus.
Well, okay. All right, so don't call for a party. Let's just get people to do it.
Sure.
Calling from a 616 area code. I'm glad we resolved all that.
Don't have a party then, God damn it.
Calling from a 616 area code.
Hey, Sam. This is Tim from Grand Rapids.
Tim from Grand Rapids. What's on your mind?
I was calling to advocate for nuclear power. I heard what you guys were saying about it this week, and I just kind of wanted to give a spiel, kind of, and see if you guys.
I love it when people call in with the spiel. All right, but let me just say this, okay? I don't have a problem in a vacuum with nuclear power, okay?
Okay.
Having known, having had a friend whose dad was one of the guys who developed the reactors. I can't remember what it was. It was for GE or I can't remember what the company was. The early reactors. And this guy was one of the premier scientists who did this. He is terrified. That guy is terrified because, and it had something to do with the Navy. The story escapes me at the moment. But there was a specific design I think it was the Navy wanted. And so they built it that way. And that design was adopted. And it is an unstable design for which is the fundamental basis for most of our nuclear reactors, I think, that are created in this country. Coupled with the incentive structure for corporations to cut corners. And we see evidence of this all the time, right? I mean, in terms of inspections and whatnot, that I find really concerning. If we could have nuclear power that was where we were actually going to have, a nationalized project, not one that was in the hands of private corporations, I would feel a lot more comfortable with nuclear power to some extent. My concerns lie with how our system has the legacy that we have in this country in terms of the design of nuclear reactors and the entities that are responsible for bringing these things online. That's where my concern lies.
Oh yeah, and I completely agree. As is, though, it's got a pretty amazing safety record. Like, for instance, no one has ever died from nuclear waste or nuclear accidents in the United States. By comparison, coal kills 9 million people per year at the waste. And the waste itself is so energy dense that it's able to be managed. Like, people asking, how are we going to take care of the waste, is an indication of something that's good about nuclear power, because you can't say the same for coal. You can't say the same for a lot of energies. And the major issue I have with solar and wind is we don't have the battery technology to actually make it large scale.
Let me ask you this. How much money do you think we would have to invest into a redesign, if what I'm saying is accurate about the design, the primary design that we have of nuclear reactors in this country, that there is a sense amongst at least some of those people who designed it that it is not the best design. How much, if we were to start, how much money, and we were to have the federal government build, let's say, 2 or 3 new nuclear powered plants, and to deal with the waste, how much of an investment do you think that would involve?
Quite a bit. I was thinking, honestly, it'd be fair to take maybe like a third of our military budget because that would actually save us money in the long run as far as conflict.
But do you think do you think $300 billion annually, or what, a third of it would be what, $270 billion a year?
Oh, I wouldn't say annually. And I kind of
how much do you think it would take? Give me a number.
Reactor.
Besides quite a bit. I mean, be a little bit more specific.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, not per year, but maybe $300 billion over, the course of 4 years. Sure.
So wait a second. You're telling me that you think
like
to build
you
think to build those nuclear reactors, we're talking only over 4 years? You're talking like to build 4 of them, you think it's going to be less than $80 billion a year?
Okay, it might be more. All
right, so what if we were to take that money
and as far as the cost?
Okay, but what if we were to invest that money in developing some form of battery technology to promote wind and solar, which I think we can both agree, right, is significantly safer.
Yes, it's just not as energy dense.
No, I agree.
You guys covered a story, not too long ago about how we need to save 50% of the Earth's ecosystem, and that's going to be a part of fighting climate change. Well, you're not going to do that with solar and wind as a majority of your energy source.
Maybe not quick enough.
And
I would agree. I mean, I think
no, not quick enough. And not only that, but if you invest into nuclear power, we can put these things online today and actually meet our energy demands and meet the energy demands.
Not today.
When we put all the cars on the road as electric.
Not today.
Well, yeah, not today. Within 10 years.
Right.
But we got a 15-year window here, and we're kind of gambling on battery technology.
Yeah.
You see what happened with Germany. They didn't have the infrastructure, quote unquote, meaning they didn't have the battery technology. I mean, like I said, I don't know if you guys have heard of the duck curve, but basically it's a graph that shows that you have a massive supply right before dark when people aren't using electricity.
Sure.
And then a massive shortage when a lot of people are.
Right. I get it.
And they actually have to cut off solar panels. That way they don't overcharge the power grid. These are real problems.
Yeah,
that
listen,
solar
I mean,
has.
Tim, let me just say this. The bottom line is, look, I don't know where we are in terms of battery technology, that if we weren't to spend $100 billion a year, or let's say $200 billion a year on developing that, how long it would take to do it. But certainly once we got that battery technology, we could roll this out pretty quickly, right? I mean, and it would be done, you could even afford to do it quicker because you can, you cut little corners, you have a misstep with a battery. It's not like 500,000 people die.
But that doesn't
I think
even happen.
Well,
I mean 500,000 people have never died from any kind of nuclear accident.
Well, Chernobyl
4,000 people died.
I understand, but you have a huge swath.
Okay.
You have a huge swath of area that is inhabitable, and we don't necessarily have that kind of land mass in this country. So if you can figure out where you can put Chernobyl in the United States of America, where it's only going to kill 4,000 people,
Yeah, but that didn't even have a containment. I mean, if you go to modern reactors like the one in Fukushima, that had 0 deaths. You can look up the World Health Organization report on it. There are 0 deaths.
All right, but my problem is
acute radiation poisoning.
Yeah, but that's over what, a time span of a couple decades?
No, 5 years.
It's over 5 years. They did a report. They said over 5 years. They also stated that there's no indication of increased infant mortality.
I just don't think my skepticism is always the time scale for these things and how maintainable.
Tim, I mean, I think your point's well taken. I think that we need to consider nuclear. I mean, we're in a very dangerous situation now, and I think there's something to be said for that.
Here's another. Have you discussed yet
who's
going to do this?
Call.
Do you trust the market?
Well, that's what I just said. I think there's a real problem with corporations. But I mean, if we can get listen, if Tim can deliver to me $200 billion a year from our military budget, and our federal government puts our best scientists on it, and we build a nuclear reactor from the ground up and redesign it to be safe. I feel somewhat comfortable with that.
Take the risk.
Yes, I certainly trust the state to do this more than I trust private companies.
I don't think I'm going to let National Grid, which allowed their pipes to get so much so that 50 houses over a stretch of 4 miles in Massachusetts blows up. For some reason, I'm a little hesitant to believe to buy that they're going to do a good job with it. A Square. Sam, let me add my voice to the others who wrote about the Carol Anderson interview. So glad we have MR. The more things change, the more the unreconstructed racist fight. Same strategy, slightly updated for those who have not heard that Paul Weyrich speech. Look it up. That Paul Weyrich made a point of saying that that Republicans should actively seek to have less voters, that they want to have less voters. Because it benefits them. Sam, Mike, Jamie, Matt, all the good callers. Thanks for keeping us alert and informed and making us laugh. Here is Donald Trump in addressing this story of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who reportedly was either killed or disappeared by Saudi intelligence. And apparently the United States was aware of this. Here is Donald Trump responding to this, which, so much for American leadership. I mean, I guess our billions of dollars worth of arms sales isn't getting us too much influence.
I am concerned about it. I don't like hearing about it. And hopefully that will sort itself out. Right now, nobody knows anything about it, but there's some pretty bad stories going around. I do not like it. Thank you. I'll see you.
I don't like it. I haven't checked with my own intelligence services, which apparently knew about it. I don't know.
It's disrupting my favorite programming.
You'll recall that, I guess this was about maybe almost a year ago when Mohammed bin Salman, was this about a year ago or was this 2 years ago? There was a publicity tour, essentially, that Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, is he the Crown Prince?
The Crown Prince.
Of Saudi Arabia, was coming in to talk about, women are going to get a chance to drive. We are moving into the 21st century. We have movie theaters. Maybe we're going to open a McDonald's. We're a new kind of Saudi Arabia. In fact, we have feted, we just had Thomas Friedman over for a wonderful dinner. And here he is. Thomas Friedman, is there any one individual who has more blatantly gotten more things wrong, but ostensibly from a thoughtful position about the Middle East than Thomas Friedman? I don't know. Suck on that for a moment as you listen to this.
I got news for you. The entire Arab world is dysfunctional right now, completely dysfunctional. And I think it has the potential to be a giant Yemen, a giant human disaster area. And so when I see someone having the balls to take on the religious component of that, to take on the economic component, to take on with all of his flaws, okay, and with all due respect to his cousins, not a one of them would have had the balls to do that. That I want to invest just a little. I just want to stick my head up and say, God, I hope you succeed. And when you do that, the holy hell comes down on you. Okay, well, fuck that. Okay, is my view. Okay, so.
There's nothing better than Thomas Friedman being completely wrong, but swearing to make it seem like I'm not going to conform to what every other establishment figure is actually conforming to.
Bloomberg didn't say balls when he had coffee with the guy.
This is what is so reactionary about. This is the definition of reactionary, right? Like, he is actually subscribing to the completely mainstream establishment worldview, but he's making it like I'm a rebel. So I don't care. Like, I got a leather jacket on. I'm going to say, F you. I'm just going for the guy because Yemen is a disaster area. So I'm going to support the guy who's going to make it even more of a disaster.
The whole region could look like the guy who I support is doing to one country where he's committing mass murder. I want to say we did dunk on him a lot in last night's post game, but I have to repeat There's a column that came out 2 days ago by Thomas Friedman called "Praying for Jamal Khashoggi." Saudi Arabia stands accused of killing him. If it did, it will be a disaster for the regime of Mohammed bin Salman. And I just want to read the first two paragraphs, if you'll permit me, because there's a quote in here. You need to guess whose quote this is, and just stipulate that maybe, in the best case scenario, this guy hasn't been killed yet. Maybe he's just being detained, although all evidence points to he's been killed. Last November 7th, I wrote a column about the new Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. It ended this way. And the column was, by the way, called Arab Spring Saudi Style. She doesn't mention. As a veteran Saudi journalist remarked to me of MBS, this guy saved Saudi Arabia from slow death, but he needs to broaden his base. It is good that he's freeing the House of Saudi influence of the clergy, but he's also not allowing any second opinion of his political and economic decisions. Any guesses on who that anonymous journalist that he's quoting in the lead graph of his Praying for Jamal Khashoggi column is?
Himself?
No, it was in fact Jamal Khashoggi, who, if
God.
he is still alive, he just released another quote that he made anonymously that might piss off his captors. I don't think that Saudi journalist, who was also a friend, would mind if I now identify him. His name was Jamal Khashoggi.
Can we get everything?
What the hell is the matter with this
let's just
guy?
publish everything Khashoggi said off the record.
I don't think he'll mind,
Un-
especially if he's in a prison in Riyadh
You know
right
how,
now.
like the cravenness that you have to have, where Friedman is like, I'm going to print this because it's going to be a cool way for me to open my store, my column, and without contemplating, like, oh, wait a second, is this going to be helpful or hurtful to him if he's still alive, or if he has any relatives, or I mean, that is stunning. And you know what would be nice? If maybe there was somebody at the New York Times who had the balls to be an editor and say, hey, wait a second. Thomas, let me give you a second chance. Let me give you a second bite at this apple.
And I don't think it's popular.
Barry Weiss?
It's not popular to say this if the New York Times editorial had the balls to do that. But you know what? I'm going to stick my head up and say, I don't give a fuck. Yeah.
The op-ed page is canceled.
So much balls, I whisper it.
Just burn it down and start over.
I get so much balls. I whisper the word. I have so much balls that I run interference for a 30-something lunatic.
I'm
letting it all
literally
hang out
feted by the Davos
Do you
and
understand?
Silicon Valley.
Do you understand if I lose this job, I'm going to have to go home to my heiress wife and just continue to live off the billions of dollars that she has.
Literally. From like a chain of Foot Lockers. Jesus Christ.
She had the balls to basically say, we're going to sell Adidas and Nike.
The ruling class, folks.
Calling from a 630 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
It may be. Who are you?
Yeah, my name's Nick, and I'm from New Yorkville, Illinois.
You're from Illinois, Nick?
Yeah.
All right. What's on your mind?
Just first-time caller, long-time listener.
All right.
I just want to say that I am 28.
Yeah.
And I've been listening to you guys since about 24. And recently, with everything that's going on, I've always been into politics. I've been following politics since I was 17. I took a current events class, and you guys convinced me to go back to school, get a degree, and start fighting the fascists. I just
Sweet.
want to thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you, Nick. I'm glad you told us that. That is, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I know, like, I talked to my grandmother. She follows politics, and my grandfather a lot, and they're both from Germany, and they just pray for the day of civility, and I have a hard time explaining to her. It's just gone for the moment.
Yeah.
This third way technocratic stuff, like this older generation that prays for it and all this stuff, it's just not going to happen in this time. And if once you realize that, I feel like we can get somewhere more productive and fighting.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think it's a real disservice by politicians, and I think some of whom are probably are well-meaning, and just people in general. I mean, the there's nothing wrong with politics being contentious. Okay, and the fact of the matter is that we're just not in an era where everybody is going to be polite. And I don't even know what this era was necessarily, where there was all this civility. I mean, I guess we had somebody on. I can't remember who it was, but was talking about the lack of partisanship in the early 50s and whatnot. And
can I make a point on that point?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was born in the early 90s, and my entire life has always been revolved around Fox News. So the civility that people make, I've never seen it.
Right, that's true.
I've never seen the civility that I've always been told about since I was born. So I don't understand why they keep trying to push this on a younger millennial class when it's always been this way for us.
I think it just makes people feel comfortable. I mean, I think like the bottom line is the least contentious things are, the more the conventional wisdom is consistent and not in conflict with itself, the less you have to do as a citizen, right? Like if there's no argument and it's like, all right, great, I can go to the beach, or I can just like pay attention to making some money, or I can go,
Does it really come down to just being the easiest thing possible?
Listen, I don't mean to make it sound so
no, I got it,
so wrong, but I think it's just like human nature to be like, I would rather just, I think, and this is the problem, is that the center to the left, not, so like that, the sort of, center to the half left, let's call it.
Center left, exactly. The center left, I think they're like good government folks who just basically like want to set it and leave it. And they just want it, the level of civic engagement is just simply in many respects not there. They want to go and live their lives. I think like sort of the liberal mentality in terms of like the classic liberal, wants to engage in things like art and music and literature and
ideas.
And ideas, and would very much like to be able to have government just function properly, whatever that is. And if everybody agrees on what it is and there's no fighting, then it's very easy to achieve that and go on with their life. And, it's, maybe there have been eras like that. I'm sure on some level it involves a significant amount of denial. Like in the 50s, things were like that, as long as you just didn't pay attention to the role of women in society and what was going on with black people. And
and if you had a certain level of privilege, right?
And you had a certain level. I mean, it was the Great Compression. There was a lot more, but yes, there was a lot more. Like it was maybe harder to find people who were not doing okay, and coming out of World War II and Social Security kicked in, so it wasn't like sort of the abject poverty that there had been 30 years ago for elderly people. And it may have just felt like this is a good time. As long as we don't question anything about certain roles and status of people in society, like we just can chug along. And maybe that's what people reminisce about. I don't know. I wasn't. I'm not that old, but I think that's what's going on there. And I think for some older people, they can break out of it. For others, they can't. And that's why you got to, sort of outmaneuver them and just make their contributions to politics less than yours.
Or maybe play them that video clip of Hillary Clinton saying that the time for civility is not now.
Yeah, but the problem with that clip is she said, but once we take power, then we should be civil again.
Yeah,
we're going to run some very mean ads. And then when we win the House,
we're going to apologize.
We will apologize. And we will move forward in a post-partisan fashion.
For third-way liberals who like her, it's a start.
It's a start. I appreciate the call, Nick. Thanks.
Yeah, can I make a quick point?
Yeah.
I found you, and I always knew you as the Jewy guy on Ring of Fire over in Chicago, and that's how I found you guys, just to let you know.
I'm sorry, the Jewy guy on Ring of Fire? Is that what it was? All right, appreciate that.
Yeah, the Ring of Fire.
Welcome back. Yeah. I'm the Jewy guy.
Right.
This is Ring of Fire.
Appreciate the call.
All right.
Yeah, see? Solid material.
Once you get outside of Chicago and
Particularly-
Illinois, I should just tell you folks that a lot of militias. Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, I believe I'm well known as Jeff in Georgia. How are you today?
Jeff in Georgia. How are you, sir?
Hey man, I'm doing fine. Listen, you're not gonna believe this, but believe it or not, like my patrons get mad at me when I don't promote myself. So DisTipHeads.com is still a thing. You can go listen to it if you want to. If you don't want to, please don't do that.
Well,
all right, Sam, I heard you talk a little bit about. Oh, please go ahead, son. If you want to.
I was just going to say we need like a dissident peasant. We need like some type of like musical sting. Maybe we should get one of your patrons to do that. We'll play that thing when you call in.
What about the Dukes of Hazzard? Matt's a little slow.
Don't get in
on the
trouble with
reflexes.
YouTube now. Don't do it.
There we go.
Sam, I heard you talking a little bit about how, typical liberal like art, literature, shit like that. Man, it's just boring, man. I'm going to go back and talk about engineering. And we're going to talk about nuclear reactors and all, but, I think everybody's a little bit down here, a little bit, think a little bit too small about this climate change thing. Sam, I got to tell you, the market in ice flows, my friend, is going to be through the roof. I know the MR community has got some guillotine fans. Brendan, I see you back there, right? I know we got some gulag fans here. Michael, I'm looking at you, okay? But listen, guillotines require assembly and manufacture. Listen, gulags require construction and manning. Ice flows, abundant. We're going to have just so many ice flows, Sam. But I don't want to get down about it. Don't get down, everyone. We're going to have lots of ice flows. We're going to put those ice flows to work because then we can cooperate together as a species.
Wait,
we can achieve great things like
water.
I'm sorry.
What's it?
What are we going to do with the ice flows?
I mean, well, listen, the traditional way is you just kind of stick your undesirable onto the ice flow. You just sort of give it a little kick right out to the
I'm not
right
sure
beyond
I'm
there
following any of this, to be honest with you.
Oh, I get it. So it's like a gulag that you don't have to build. You can just put somebody on the ice floe and send them out to sea.
Exactly, and we are frankly going to have a lot of ice flows that are going to require some usage. Okay, believe it or not, I'm in the middle of the path of a hurricane, so I really probably need to go.
All right.
Everyone have a good
Stay
now.
safe.
Left is best.
Stay safe.
What if the ice floes are all melted?
The ice flows. I got a little bit lost with the gulags and the ice flows.
I don't know. All I know is it's the voters' fault.
Attorney Andrew, the National Constitution Center announced that Joe Biden will present George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush with a Liberty Medal Award service towards veterans. That's great.
Barf.
Turns out creating more dead veterans and or allowing veterans to kill more brown people in service to veterans. Well, that's great. I'm glad that Joe Biden is, I'm glad that he can let go of George W. Bush basically being one of the key reasons why we have Brett Kavanaugh on the court. I mean, Joe Biden, right? Like that's how he's going to run, isn't it? Like he's going to be in that. Like we're gonna restore America's sort of niceness again. That's going to be his pitch.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, I hope you're right. Weirdland. Am I what the angry mob looks like? I was one of the activists that shut down the Lamar Street Bridge in Austin upon confirmation of Kavanaugh. The one who was intentionally hit by a car. YouTube video. Wow. Thank you, Mayday Mindy, for the dress. Jamie, the red rose means what you think it means.
What? Which red rose?
I don't know. I think maybe at...
Oh, they were wearing a dress with a red rose on it, perhaps?
I don't know. This gets me to... Gets me to Tommy... Oh, here we go. All right, I'll check it out. Kelly Paul's nightstand. Unless guns are 13 inches long and have... okay. Dr. Chaos. I know that as a general principle, Democrats are better than Republicans, but I hope Joe Manchin loses his race. He votes with the Republicans enough that being able to get rid of the bipartisan cover he supplies the GOP on terrible legislation nominations is worth the more than occasional good vote he makes. Do you think that really that is in play? I mean, with Joe Lieberman, it seemed to me that was definitely the case, that he was providing bipartisan cover. But does anybody really contemplate that? Is anybody saying that Brett Kavanaugh was a bipartisan choice?
No. Even mainstream depictions of it. Like, I'm thinking of this stupid Saturday Night Live locker room sketch, which was not funny. But it ended, the only sort of funny lines were of Schumer, depicting Schumer as just sort of like a tired, literal, like, loser. And then Manchin walking by and, like, punching him in the balls. Like even in the most mainstream, it's like, this guy is just off doing his own thing. He's nominally a Democrat, could do whatever he wants.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could say is this. It's like, look, I would have been perfectly happy to have Joe Manchin lose his primary. I didn't think it was going to happen just because of the nature of Joe Manchin and of West Virginia. But that said, if Joe Manchin is senator and even Kristen Sinema, who I really, really don't like.
Trash. She is such trash.
Really, really don't like. But if she is senator... And even if Phil Bredesen,
awful, maybe the worst of the three.
Yeah, if those three are senators in 2016, Merrick Garland is sitting in that seat, which is far better than Neil Gorsuch, and that's just the bottom line. And then the implications of Brett Kavanaugh are much less.
You're from the fucking establishment.
I mean, of course, I'm sitting here in this suite provided by George Soros. But I mean, that's just the reality.
What if they nominated Lonnie to look?
I'm suspect of that. This is that to me. This is red flaggy all over the place.
What if they nominated Lonnie? What is her name? Lonnie Guinier. If they nominated her to the Supreme Court, you would have had millions of people protesting. And as you know, I mean, think about this for 1 second. If you could get this through your establishment mind, Mitch McConnell wouldn't seat Merrick Garland, who's a white man. Now, had Barack Obama nominated a leftist black progressive, not only would the Democratic base have gotten much more excited, then Mitch McConnell's got to worry about being perceived of as racist, which no national Republican leader ever wants to be tarnished with that. They didn't know how to play the politics, but you'll just go defending them all day because it's mini MSNBC with an electoral focus.
Oh
You're
God.
a fucking establishment shill.
Ugh, they need to replace him with a real leftist. I'm sorry.
There you go. Someone's lying for a job. Jonathan Armstead.
That was one of the most nakedly Machiavellian plays I've ever seen.
Jonathan Armstead. Sam, great job at the conference. As always, please continue to razz Michael for not having seen the movie Bulworth. Here's my pitch. Michael Jamal. It's a movie about a guy who shuns his 60s liberal persona, then turns into a candidate endorsing socialized medicine, breaking up corporate control in the media, and a tax break for interracial couples. Also, he makes out with Halle Berry after she laments the loss of Huey P. Newton. I'm sad you haven't seen it, but more shocked that it isn't your dream board. Chris Lapaco. I used to work for the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, driver and vehicle service. That's a little bit terrifying. And basically, I'm the Ronald Reagan of driver's license issues. In Minnesota, you can have a P.O. box as an address in a very limited circumstances. But typically, if someone lists a P.O. box as an address, the card will not be issued because the person doesn't live in a P.O. box. They can have their ID mailed to a P.O. box, but if the address they gave isn't a residence, the card won't be mailed out. If North Dakota had a problem with the addresses, they shouldn't have issued the cards in the first place, but people should be aware that listing a P.O. box as their residence can screw up all sorts of stuff. Don't do it. Make sure you have a real address on your license or ID card. I got news for you, folks. P.O. box. And I am fine. Vespa. I have shown some MR clips to my dad, and he generally agrees with points made. I feel like the progress, but then he tunes into Tucker and Hannity at night, which leads to arguments. Does it seem like there's just a general apathy to actual issues that's causing people to not ever shift their viewpoints? How can we combat this, or can we? Thanks, Sam.
If he tunes into Hannity every night, that's not apathy. That's inertia and habit.
Yeah, that's aggressive stupidity.
I don't know. I'd have to know a little bit more about your dad as to find the wedge.
Ugh, it's
First
so hard.
principles.
It's so hard when somebody pollutes their brain with Fox News every single day. My good friend, whose parents' house I like to go to in rural Rhode Island, she tried so hard to get her dad to go for Bernie, and he was like almost gonna do it, and then he just watched too much Fox News, and he's Trump all the way still.
I have a friend who works for CNN, and her and her dad have some tension over this, and it's he believes Hannity over his own daughter. So,
well, it's a daughter. It's too bad he didn't have a son. He would have been able to convince him. Zero Sum Gamer. Hey Sam, is Michael working on a book? He never mentions it. Calling from a 972.
It's in progress if you're interested. It's being released by Zero Books, and it's a very in-depth critique of the intellectual dark web and the social conditions that give rise to it.
I'm working on a book too, by the way, just so you know.
972 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Will from Austin. Can you hear me all right?
Sort of. What's on your mind, Will?
Okay. Let me get off the Bluetooth. Hey, is this better?
Much better. Boy, that Bluetooth stinks, with all due respect.
Oh, yeah. It's all good.
No, it's not. That's my point.
I want to say I think if Democrats are serious about retaking power, they really need to look into statehood, not just, Puerto Rico we've been talking about, also D.C., Virgin Islands, and if they're really serious, they can do what is perfectly legal under the Constitution, at least if we pack the courts like we should, is shrink D.C. down to the size of a broom closet and turn it into 100 different states. And then we'll see. Then just use that as leverage to actually do real change, like abolishing or virtually abolishing the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know about making 100 states out of Washington D.C. That may be a little bit tricky, but I mean, I think listen, the more of these ideas that are out there that actually gain some traction, the more leverage there is. So I'm for it. I mean, broadly speaking. I appreciate the call.
The state representation things just seems like such a slam dunk, though, because
total.
Like you're doing the right thing, and it helps you.
And, yes. And who has it's not like the right has like a 50-year history of agitating against Washington, D.C. becoming a state. Like, it would have to be one of those things that, I mean, they would gin it up immediately, right? Like, it would all of a sudden be the pivot to, this has been the thing that we've been marching about for years on the right is like, keep the state. It would be quick, but I really don't think, I think broadly speaking, I would bet you most of the people in this country do not know that Washington, D.C. has no representation. Calling from an 864, and they would have no problem. They wouldn't even see the relevance of it. Calling from an 864 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Oh, I got to go soon.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey, Sam. It's Eddie from Texas.
Teddy or Eddie?
Eddie like
from
Edward.
Texas. Hello, Eddie. What's on your mind?
So I actually work on a political campaign here in Texas 7th District. And one of the main things or strategies that we have is getting people to vote early. This is a Republican district that's very possibly going to swing left. And, the way that they pitched it to us yesterday was that you have to encourage people to vote early. And like once early voting starts, you have to get them because we're going knocking on doors. You have to say, all right, did you vote yet? And then say, well, let's go vote right. Go get it done right now. Because, something could come up. There could be a flood or whatever. But also, just in regards to North Dakota, I don't know what it is, what the law is in North Dakota, but in Texas, they have a voter ID law, but you can bypass that voter ID law if you vote by mail and if you vote early. So I don't know about voting early in person, but I know if you vote by mail, you don't have to have an ID. So it seems that, I mean, if North Dakota is the same, because I don't see how they would check everyone's ID by mail, or if they even have
They may
voter
not
ID by
even
mail,
have
but,
vote by mail. I don't know, but
They do. There is absentee voting.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can, I mean, I'm sure you can just print it out and mail it in, but that would be a feasible way to win that election if everybody just voted by mail, right?
Right. No, it's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Oh, yeah. Also, just another quick thing. So it seems that this, I have a friend who's like, anti-establishment, Alex Jones type of conservative, or like he likes to call himself.
Right.
But it kind of seems that, and he was gung-ho about Trump, of course, but it seems like this momentum of like the Steve Bannon alt-right kind of thing is kind of died down, and now it seems that the whole Trump wing has merged with the quote-unquote establishment Republican wing, and now it seems that Mitch McConnell kind of has control of whatever Trump does, and then Trump just controls his bit. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think to a large extent you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people are. I think this was on the route, but I think Kavanaugh, brought it all together. There's very little never Trumpers anymore, and there seems to be, Trump realizes. I mean, because here's I think what's going to happen, and I think I've been saying for a while that I think Donald Trump and his advisors probably have no problem with losing the House, because Donald Trump will, and he's already started, campaign for 2020 against the Democrats. He's been saying for a year that they're obstructing him, and hopefully, by within 6 months, they'll actually be able to obstruct him in some way. I think they have all just sort of made peace with each other. And, it was just, all they had was stylistic differences. And frankly, I think, the other thing about Kavanaugh is his style was Trump's style. This is the first time that we saw a major political figure just pursue the strategy of keep lying and denying and winning with it, aside from Trump. And that's I think that is now going to be the MO with the Republican Party. We saw it with Lindsey Graham. I think that's what it's going to be. But appreciate the call, Eddie. All right, folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got to stop with the calls. I know we've had people who are on hold we have literally...
Stop that.
28 callers on the line. I apologize. We're going to take 5 IMs and then a skedaddle. And Winara, in face of this dangerous liberal threat, Rand Paul should have got the guts to put forth a bill to defund Acorn again. Auto to chat. I'm hoping that Kavanaugh confirmation will help the Democrats this November. Karl Rove was on Fox making the same statement. I do believe the GOP has alienated a good portion of the independent voters. Thoughts? Yeah. We'll see. I think it's going to help in the House races, maybe in the Senate races. Would you consider, JJ Cool, would you consider doing an interview on government corruption and the differences? The differences. Oh, the differences of government corruption? I'm not sure. Michael did a half-decent job last night getting into it. It's talked about often and almost always by dumb or naive people. I'm not sure.
Wait, I missed that. What is it?
The differences in government corruption?
Oh.
The different types of government corruption?
Oh, I'll explain it later. It's like not just, it's looking at corruption as a whole versus in particular. I mean, it's looking at Brazil, and it's looking at, it takes too long to explain right now.
Colin from Nebraska. My coworker went to the Council Bluffs rally, and after Trump did his whole Make America Blank Again, the Rolling Stones song You Can't Always Get What You Want started playing to end the rally. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right. Why don't you come over and I'll fix you a nice candlelit dinner and play you some Cardi B. I know Cardi B because she loves Social Security. J-Pup, tuning in after just registering to vote in New York. All right, good job. Couldn't be more thrilled to cast my progressive vote in November. Left is best. Tom Cat. Hi, guys. I'm going to see the Black Panthers Vanguard of the Revolution documentary tonight at my local film society showing as part of Black History Month. Hopefully it's good. Last night I saw The Shape of Water, and I've thought on it. I want to share with Jamie. I thought that the film is Black History Month this month?
No, it's February. We're getting a jump on it, I guess.
Stanley Nelson makes good documentaries, though. I've actually
How is it part of Black History Month?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's part of Black History.
But
got that part.
Black History Month is February. I thought that film, as good as it was, sort of had commentary on the beauty of Passadism in regards to our potential future relationships with dolphins.
Ooh.
Am I weird in thinking this? I can answer that. Yes. Lewis 77. I've only recently learned about the bullshit asymmetry principle, also known as Brandolini's law, that states that the amount of energy required to refute bullshit is an order of magnitude greater than the energy required to produce it. I've been wondering out loud all week how Sam plans to fight this when he debates Charlie Kirk at Politicon. I guess we'll see. General Strike. Is Michael still supportive of Angela Nagel? She propagates the stories of the intellectual dark web and opposes abortion rights.
Okay, those are both inaccurate statements.
Matthias. Hey, our MR crew. You guys should interview Rebecca Traister. Yes, we're going to. And how... on women's anger and how it's been suppressed on her book. She was on Hayes' podcast last week if listeners want to get a taste. Yeah, no, we're going to. Jimmy Reefer Cake, more brownies, 3 more cola dict. Sam, you've probably heard about how Dave Packman just lost a ton of regular viewers and subscribers for taking your side on Jimmy Dore divide. I saw a video by one of the Dore fans, and they're literally calling you centrist neoliberals.
That's why we dip in every couple months just to prune some of those followers.
Yeah,
so it's not always at once.
a little prune.
Made me sick how they can just lie like that. They're idiots. Who cares? Johnny Ganja Cookie. Jamie just reminded me of one of my favorite jokes. Crazy ex-girlfriends are like a box of chocolates. They'll both kill your dog. Great leap forward. One thing that Trump did as part of the put him just over the line was he said healthcare would be cheaper, better for everyone. He didn't run on Republican policy. Healthcare. And the final IM of the day, parliamentary cricket enthusiast. Yesterday, that son of a Nazi spoke so overtly negatively about my American cousins. The gentleman from Budapest should be more careful. I do say this is a slippery wicket. Commence the match.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. Into years, while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how much longer I can stay in, or how much more I got to pay to play in. I know somehow the lights got graded somewhere before the credits faded.